How's it going? You guys doing all right?
Yeah, you?
The wife finally knows what time of the day it is and everything. Oh, yeah. Well, they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is he on a detox? Are you on a detox?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it bad?
No, not really.
Could be, see, I didn't do that because I'm really wasn't addicted to that, to wheat.
No,
I'm
well,
addicted to sweets, but not to wheat. Because that was after 3 weeks of doing okay, then I all of a
yeah.
sudden had this,
I have my moments.
yeah.
Like when the Earth Fare ad pops up and they got freshly baked sourdough in there.
No.
I could do that all day long.
Oh, my, no. Yes, good for you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I don't know if that's on or not. Hello. There it is. Okay. Welcome to late night. All right. So let's go ahead and have a prayer. Heavenly Father, we come humbly bound before you. We just thank you so much for this day you've given us, the time that we can come together and study. Use the talents that you've given us, the abilities that you've provided us to grow, and not only grow ourselves, but to help nourish one another and just lift each other up. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for this family that meets here. And we know that none of us are perfect and none of us have it all figured out, but together we, in patience and in love, can work our way forward. And we ask that you continue to give us that opportunity to do so, to help one another, to mature with one another and truly be profitable and doing your work. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for all that you do for us, but especially your Son who went to a cross and gave his life for us. It's in his name that we pray. Amen. All right, we are in the book of Judges, and I get to say that this week and next week. Same thing is true with our Ephesians study on Sunday mornings. And if I'm reading the calendar right, it looks as if on Sunday mornings we are going to be transitioning to a series. Now, this is in March. Transition into a series about walking away from idolatry. So we're going to talk about idolatry in the modern age, so to speak. And that'll be Sunday mornings. And I believe Wednesday. Now, don't be surprised if this is backwards. But I believe on Wednesdays, we are going to be talking about discipling. Discipling where to go, what it means to go and make disciples, and some practical advice on, some of those particular things. So that's where we're going next. So just kind of bear that in mind. But tonight we are back in the book of Judges, and we are talking about Samson. If I can get the iPad to fire up. We were talking about Samson. I think we pretty much figured out, or should I say, exhausted all of what we can say about some of the previous judges. We had Jephthah. We talked a little bit about him, some of the difficulties with the whole idea of, what did he kill his daughter? Did he not? What were the alternatives? and discuss that a little bit. At the end of the day, it's not really the major point, what he did. It's as far as the sacrifice goes, it's more about, the vow and, speaking or going beyond, God and what his plan would be. Oh, come on. All right. So back in the book of Judges, we then went on and we talked a little bit about, and you really can't talk too much about too many of them because, well, quite frankly, there are 3 judges that are mentioned there in a row that we just don't know really that much about. They mentioned some things that maybe to us seem kind of odd. For instance, we have Ibzan and Elon and Abdon was the one that had, he was the one that, if you look at it, he had the 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys, and he judged Israel for 8 years. So he rode donkeys. To us, that's just kind of weird, but probably just meant that he was a wealthy guy. He was an influential guy. And then if you go back, you can look at the other 2. Ibzan had 30 sons and 30 daughters, and the only thing really that we know about him is that he gave all of them to marry foreigners. They all married foreigners, which, that's been part of the problem all along. But then we get over to chapter 13, and we're introduced to, again, this is Ed's opinion. It doesn't have to be your opinion, but we're introduced to one of the most interesting characters in the Bible. Samson is just this, kind of complex fellow whose story, kind of weaves in and out. And sometimes you're wondering, this, how can this guy be considered righteous? And then sometimes he does act in righteousness. Sometimes he seems to be the great defender of his people. At other times, he doesn't seem like he cares at all. Judges chapter 13. Did I say 13? Okay. Judges chapter 13. Let's just read a little bit. His story is kind of interesting, and it's very interesting even from the very beginning of it, because we're told more about Samson than most other judges that we have in the Bible. Now, Gideon, when we meet him, he's in the wine press threshing out the grain, right? But he's an adult. I mean, he's a full-grown man who, maybe not of the biggest clan, maybe not of the biggest family, biggest tribe. He doesn't have a really good estimation of himself, but he is a full-grown individual. If I'm remembering correctly, Samson is the only judge whose backstory we really know from the time that he was young. Which, in and of itself is kind of an interesting story. But let's begin in chapter 13 and verse 1. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And so the Lord gave them into hand of the Philistines for 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. And his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now therefore, be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head. For the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God. Very awesome. And I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. But he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God and from the womb to the day of his death. All right, so let's stop there for a second and just kind of consider a couple of things here that are important to the story. Number one, you have the wife of Manoah being introduced in the text, and we don't really know all that much about her at this point. We know where they're from. We know she's married to a guy by the name of Manoah. And the only other pertinent piece of information that we're given is that she is unable to bear children. She's unable to bear children. Okay. Now, this is something that comes up often in the Bible, doesn't it? Okay. Who are some of the other people in the Bible who they were told, or at least they at some point revealed that the Bible reveals about them that they were barren and unable to bear children, and yet ended up bearing children? Sarah would be one. Sarah would be one. Okay, Rachel for a long time seemed unable to bear children. Ended up bearing children. I can't remember exactly if we're told she was barren. We know that she did not bear children for a while. Yes. Elizabeth. Did it say that about her? She was old. I know that. She was old. So, well, Sarah laughed, and her child was named Isaac because of it. But you're right about the not speaking part. It was actually John's father who did not believe, and he was punished by not being able to speak. And as a matter of fact, the first words that he speaks once the child is born is his name is John, because that's what the angel told him to name him. But anyhow, yeah, I mean, there are several, and that's the point. Or you do have, maybe not necessarily barren, so let's kind of expand it. They didn't have children until well past the age of being able to do so, even in our day, safely. I don't know. I mean, what's the standard cutoff age here? I mean, 35 is kind of pushing it, getting up to 40. Is that about right? Okay. 35 high risk, past 40. Over 50, it's really dangerous. Okay. Glenn? It does say that? Okay. I just didn't know. And it may say that too about Rachel. I'm not sure. But I know there are several. So we have Sarah, we have Elizabeth. Another one was Hannah. Another one was Hannah. Could not bear children, and she went to the temple and prayed and prayed and prayed. And, God heard her prayer. And of course, she bears a son who is relevant to our story, right? Yeah. Yeah. So we're not going to be introduced to him until the end, but Rachel was barren. Okay, good. Thanks for looking that up, Len. So Rachel too was barren. So very good. Very good. So we have that happening a lot, right? God could have chose anybody. I'm sure there were other righteous women, righteous men, but why do you think he chooses the woman who's barren? Well, I think it's partly what we've talked about all along through the book of Judges. It's part of what you could talk about going all the way back to the conquest, is that God is trying to reinforce to them over and over and over and over and over that you are dependent upon me. This would never happen if it weren't for some kind of supernatural intervention. Okay? You're barren, can't have children, all of a sudden you're having children. That just doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. So God is, in the mix here. And these women being barren is just one of those points, small as it may be, where God is reinforcing, upon the people, or reinforcing to the people that, you need to lean upon me. I'm the one that is making these things happen, like the walls of Jericho falling down. Like so many other things in your history, the wandering in the wilderness, the fact that your shoes didn't wear out, manna from heaven and the quail and, all of this stuff. God is taking care of you. God is doing these things. He's making the provision. And to me, this is just kind of another point along that line. But anyhow, he goes on and he talks about this Nazirite vow. And this is, it's even to the point where she, because this child was in her womb, is not allowed to drink the wine or strong drink or eat nothing unclean. Of course, you know, that's, pretty much standard fare, nowadays. I mean, you don't drink when you're, pregnant and have, with child. So, but here is specific reason is that he is this Nazirite. What does it mean to be a Nazirite? Yeah, and that one's mentioned in the text. Never cut your hair. There were three basic rules, three basic ideas that Nazirites lived their life by. Number one, you could not cut your hair. Number two, you could not have alcohol. But if I'm remembering correctly, it's more than simply alcohol. It would be anything that would be considered fermented or going through that, putrefaction process. And then anybody remember the last one? You couldn't touch any dead thing. Couldn't touch anything dead because that would render you impure or I guess unclean, if you want to put it that way. And we'll learn some of this as we go along, but he's this Nazirite. And of course, the Nazirite vow thing is kind of interesting, and we'll come back to that a little bit next week, but we don't want to get kind of bogged down in it now. So continuing on, it says, verse 8, Manoah prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again to us and teach us what we are to do with the child who will be born." And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she sat in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, "Behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me." And Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man and said to him, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" And he said, "I am." And Manoah said, "Now, when your words come true, what is to be the child's manner of life, and what is his mission?" And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat of anything that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, or eat any unclean thing. All that I commanded her, let her observe." Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "Please let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you." And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "If you detain me, I will not eat of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord." For Manoah did not know that he was an angel of the Lord. Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name? So that when your words come true, we may honor you." And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why do you ask my name? Seeing it is wonderful." So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on a rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flames went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. And the angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife. And Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." But his wife said to him, "If the Lord meant to kill us, he would not have accepted the burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us these things, or announced to us such things as these." And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Mahaneh Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. All right, so over to chapter 14. And we're not going to read all of it, but Samson is born, and we kind of know his story, about his birth at least. But much like the story of Christ, we know about his birth. We know one incident during the time he was young where he ends up in the temple and he's studying with the priests. But then, boom! All of a sudden, we're in the 30th year of his life. The same thing is kind of true with Samson, I should say. We are told his birth story, his backstory, and it's a fabulous story. about his vow and about how the angel appears and how, he has this, mission, apparently, to basically be the deliverer of his people, or at least the start of the deliverance of his people from the Philistines. And then all of a sudden, boom, fast forward, and Samson is seeking a wife. And that's kind of how we open chapter 14. And Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father. And I've always found this part kind of fascinating. He goes out and he sees this woman, and no doubt she's beautiful. No doubt he is enticed, by her. It doesn't say he goes up and talks to her. Doesn't say he makes any kind of advances to her. He goes home, and here's what he says. I saw one of the daughters of Philistines in Timnah. Now, get her for me as a wife. It's like, okay, that's just kind of weird, huh? Now marriages were, arranged, and at times, they certainly didn't do things the way, we would do them today in order to meet people. But even for the day, this seems a little bit odd. Dad, go get me the woman, just a little bit weird. Oh, yeah, definitely so. But I don't know. It's just, it seems really kind of brutish, that he kind of puts it that way. But his father says to him, look, is there not a woman, a lady, of our own people? Why do you have to go to the Philistines, Samson? They're the enemy, and they have been the enemy. So here's Samson, and he's the guy who's supposed to deliver the people from the Philistines. That was stated in the last chapter. That's what the angel told, Samson's parents. He's going to deliver them from the Philistines, but here he's going down and he's marrying, he wants this Philistine woman. But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. Right? Samson wanted what he wanted. And it seems like he was driven by, that lust of the eyes, right? So anyhow, his father and his mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Samson went down with his father and his mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came toward them. And of course, as the story goes on, Samson kills the lion with his own, 2 hands, right? And it says now, I don't know, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. I've never torn a young goat, so I don't know how easy that is. It sounds kind of disgusting. But a small animal apparently is what they're going for here. Just as easy as it would be for you to, take the life of a small animal, it's just that easy for Samson to kill a lion. The lion comes up, it's like, snap his neck, he's done, right? That's kind of what the picture is painting. But then the interesting thing is he returns by there a few days later, and he sees, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. And he scraped it out with his hands and went on eating as he went. And he came to his mother and his father, and they ate. And he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. Now, why is that important? He tells a riddle later, but what else? He can't touch dead things, right? He tells the riddle later on, but it doesn't matter what kind of dead thing it is. It's not just dead human beings. He can't touch dead things. Here he does it. And this is one of those moments where, and so far there's a couple of them, it seems. Why marry the Philistine woman? why are you over here touching the dead body of the lion to scrape out the honey? And that sounds kind of nasty anyhow, right? But I mean, that's what he does. So we've got these couple of things that make you ponder, okay, this is the righteous guy who's going to lead the people out from the Philistines. The story really is not painting this amazing picture of this uber righteous guy who just wants to do, the right thing, at least up to this point. So anyhow, the story goes on, and he goes, and if you go down verse 10, says, the father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there for the young men. So the young man used to do, and soon, as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, "Let me now put a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast, and find out, then I will give you 30 garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. Put your riddle that we may hear it," they said. All right, so without reading the rest of the context and spending our time just simply reading it, Samson goes down to marry this woman. There's these Philistine people gathered there together, these young men, and he decides to give them a riddle. And the riddle, if you skip down, just to verse 14 says, "Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. And in 3 days they could not solve the riddle. On the fourth day, they said to Samson's, wife." So they couldn't get it from Samson. So they go to the wife, and they try to get her to, tell them. And she really doesn't, want to tell them. Of course, she's a Philistine. They're Philistines. And eventually they do end up getting the information, out of her. And on the seventh day, verse 18, they, before the sun went down, the men of the city come to him and they say, "What is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion?" And he said to them, "If you had not plowed," and this is not very flattering. I mean, you got to remember, this is 7 days, this is his wedding feast. Married 7 days here. And here's his statement: "If you had not plowed with my heifer, then you would not have found out my riddle." So he calls his wife a cow. I don't know how he expected that to go over real well. But basically he's telling him, "Look, I know where you got the information. I mean, you had to go and get it, from my wife." And of course, now Samson's in this position where he owes them, these garments. He owes them the garments. So where's he going to get the garments from? Well, Samson comes up with a novel idea. "I'm just going to go kill a bunch of Philistines." So Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 men of the town. Ashkelon is one of the Philistine cities. Struck the men out of the town and took their spoil and gave the garments to those who he had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. We're never introduced to that guy. We don't know, who he is, but apparently, Samson leaves, and they said, "Oh, okay, well, you're going to go marry somebody else." Strained relationship. After some days, verse 1, chapter 15, Samson went to visit his wife with a young goat, and he said, "I will go into my wife in the chamber." But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, "I really thought that you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead." And Samson said to them, "This time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm." All right, so Samson's mad. He's upset. So they upset him because they cheated with the riddle. He goes out, he kills 30 of them. He comes back, he's still angry, he storms off. They give his wife away. He comes back, won't let him in, says she's married now to somebody else. So what does he do? Well, he goes, and I don't know how he does this. but he catches 300 foxes, and he ties basically torches to their tails. Okay, ties torches to their tails and sends them into the fields of the Philistines to burn their fields down. And of course, all of this. If you wonder about the character of Samson, that's sort of one track to follow. In all of this, however, you've got to see this picture where God is working it so that little by little by little by little, he is putting these thorns in the relationship between Samson and the Philistine people. It's just going to get worse and worse as the story goes along. He's killing 30 of them. Now he's catching foxes and setting all of their fields, on fire. Verse 6, the Philistines said, who has done this? Samson, the son of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. End of her. Horrible story. Hey, you're going to burn our fields? Well, we're going to burn the woman who would have been your wife, but we gave to somebody else. You got to wonder what that other guy was thinking. I mean, was she given to me or not? But just out of spite, they killed her. Verse 7, Samson said to them, if this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you. And after that, I will quit. And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow. And he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Edom. Then the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah and made a raid on Lehi. And the men of Judah said, well, why have you come up against us? And they said, we have come up to bind Samson to do to him as he has done to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, do you not know the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? And they said to them, as they did to me, so I have done to them. In other words, they did this to me first. They're the ones that came at me. They cheated with the riddle, so I had to make them pay. And then when I made them pay, they took my wife, and so I had to make them pay again. And then they burnt their fields, and then they burnt her, and now they're going to have to pay again. And it just keeps going on and on like that. So the people there, they're telling them, look, how about you let us bind you? We'll take you to the Philistines. We'll turn you over, and everything will be at peace. Everything will be at peace. Now, this is probably one of the more famous incidents in the life of Samson. They take Samson to these. Leaders, and we don't know exactly all of what happens, but we do know that at some point, Samson bends down, picks up the jawbone of a donkey, and by the time he's done, he's killed 1,000 men. 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. Now, these are soldiers, right? Soldiers probably armed with either spears and swords or some combination of those two, shields, armor. All he's got is the jawbone of a donkey. And he kills 1,000 of them while at the same time fending them off. So, truly he was a man of great, power. But look at verse 16. And Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, have I struck down 1,000 men. And as soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand. And that place was called Ramoth Lehi. And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord and said, you have granted this day this great salvation by the hand of your servant. And shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? So God splits open the rock. Out comes the water, and Samson is refreshed. And verse 20 says, and he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. So you might think the story of Samson is done at this point. It's not. It's just getting up to the point where we're going to talk about the woman who does him in, right? So Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute, and he went in to her. And the Gazites were told, Samson has come here. And they were surrounded, and they surrounded the place and set an ambush for him all night at the city gate. And they kept quiet all night, saying, let us wait till the light of morning, then we will kill him. But Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he arose, which, think about it. Now go back to tracking the character of Samson here. Okay? Number one, he wants to pick a woman who is from the Philistines, even though God has told his people, don't intermix with them. Number two, he kills the lion, but then comes back later and scrapes the honey out of the carcass that he's not supposed to be touching, right? And then he seemingly gets in this battle with the Philistines that's kind of, well, you did this to me, I'm going to do it to you. Kind of a vengeance sort of thing. Now we get over to chapter 16, and Samson goes to Gaza, and he sees a prostitute. So he's in there with, the prostitute, and they're lying in wait for him. Samson arose about midnight, and he says he went to the city gate. He took a hold of the city gate, pulled them out of place. It'd be like going back here to these double doors and not just tearing the doors out, but the whole frame that is around it, tearing that whole thing out. Now, of course, these doors are a lot smaller, but tearing the whole thing out, and then look at what he does with it. He put them on his shoulders, and he carried them to the top of the hill that was in front of Hebron. Why do that? Well, it's just kind of a mocking thing, kind of making fun of them. I'm taking your security, marching it to the nearest hill and setting it up there like a billboard for everybody to see that you are weak. It was a very interesting thing. But he says he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the Lord of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, seduce him and see where his strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. All right, so Delilah is there. They realize Samson really has this thing about Philistine women. So these guys realize it. They come to her and they say, look, we need to do something about his strength. Find some way, find some weakness, find some little thing that we can do to keep his strength at bay and to humble him. And we're going to pay you lots and lots. It's not even a tragic love story. Samson seemingly is the only person who is in love in this story, because from the word go, Delilah seems to really not care that too much about it. A lot of people try to paint it differently, but there's really not too much in the text that really wants us to kind of reach out to her and be compassionate at all, if you want to put it that way. He is certainly not her love interest. This is not one of the great love stories of all time, as some people like to paint it. But it's just a tragedy from the word go. So anyhow, we know the story. She comes and she asks Samson, and the first time, she asked, he says, look, if you just bind me with fresh bowstrings, they got to be fresh, never been used. Just bind me with those, and it'll be okay. And then middle of the night, she yells out, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He breaks those, and then it proceeds to, smash those people up like they were, toothpicks. And then Delilah says, behold, you've mocked me, verse 10, and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound. Well, verse 11, he comes up with another. If you bind me with new ropes, if you get new ropes, it's not bowstrings, it's ropes. So if you take these new ropes and you bind me with those, then I'll be weak just like any other man. And the same thing happens. Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he wakes up in the inner chamber, but he snaps the ropes off of his arms like threads, and, same thing over and over. And Delilah says, verse 13 to him, until now you've mocked me and told me lies, but tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with a web and fasten it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. Does that work? No, that doesn't work. A good-looking braid in the back of your hair, might serve some purposes, but it's not going to take the strength away from, Samson. You might be the envy of all the women in town, but, that's about it. It doesn't work either. And the same thing happens. Get down to verse 15. She says, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You've mocked me 3 times. You've told me where your strength lies. And of course, we know the rest of the story. Was that second bell? Yeah. Okay. So we'll pick up there next time. Again, it's going to take a little longer to get through the story of Samson. And I didn't want to just stand up and read it, but so continue reading it. It's not much left. Read through the story, and we'll come back, and there's some really, really, really good lessons from the life of Samson, and we'll be able to dig into those next time and think about some of those things. But appreciate everybody's attention. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Doing all right, man. You
started working up a new Wednesday shoot.
Did he call? Did he get in touch with you?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say I'll do it. I have a lesson already ready to go.
You have the lesson?
Hey, if you want to do it, that's fine.
Do it?
You got songs?
I have songs too, yeah.
Right, just do the songs. I'll do it.
You do an stage, Mike.
What's that?
This is off the stage.
Oh, me.
You doing it?
No, you can do it. You want me to do it? Okay, I'll do it. Ain't a big deal. Well, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started this evening with a few announcements. Just want to make sure that we are up to date on our sick list. There are several that are in the bulletin. Some of those have been updated. Remember to keep Brother Bob White in your prayers. They did make it to Texas. His new address is in the bulletin. So make sure that you continue to pray for him as he gets settled in and finds his home out there. Also remember Colleen Hope came forward this past week and rededicated herself, to use her words, to the Lord, seeking greater devotion, seeking greater help in her walk with God. So continue to keep her in your prayers. Rick Wanaguaro was admitted to Northside with cellulitis. So keep him in your prayers. Jerry, Lou's son, is. Have we heard anything about him? He was supposed to have surgery Monday, I believe, but I think that was kind of up in the air. So continue to keep Jerry and Lou in your prayers. Also, Sandy, Mike's mom, found out after Sunday that she does not have cancer in her lungs, but she does have a tumor on her liver. Or a mass on her liver of some kind. So I'm assuming that's going to require further testing. Okay. All right. So once things kind of calm down with her body, they're going to go in and do testing. And then who am I missing? Kelly. Do we know any more about Kelly? Oh, he's in Bay Pines. Well, I knew he was supposed to have surgery, and he was in a rehab for a while, but I wasn't sure. We weren't sure where that at. Okay, in the hospital. Okay, because there's several places he could be. Okay, all right. So keep him in your prayers. Kelly Reed, he's battling cancer. And apparently is at Bay Pines. Okay. Anyone else? It seems like I'm forgetting someone.
I have 2 additions to that.
Okay.
My friend Kelly, that I used to work with, her husband had a quiet car Sunday night. Kelly Violante.
Violante. You can give me that after.
Demetria comes to
Yes.
and she passed out last night, was having seizures, and I guess when she fell, she broke her arm, and now she has to have surgery, so she's in the hospital.
Okay. So if you did not hear Melissa's two, Kelly Violante, husband was hit by a car and killed. So keep her, a friend of Melissa's, in your prayers, and also Demetria. Her mom has sickle cell and apparently collapsed this past week, having seizures, and ended up breaking her arm. So keep them in your prayers, and we'll get them in the bulletin as well and send them out. Anyone else? Okay, one thing that we have, and I know this is last minute, and I know most of us probably struggle to have schedules where we can do things with just simply 2 days' notice, but Bob's condo needs to be sold. He is in Texas, but his place is still here. Much of his stuff is still here, and our sister Debbie Wright is trying to get Bob's place ready for sale so that they can use that money for Bob's care. So it is necessary for us to have a work party this Saturday. If you can make it out and bring a friend, if you've got a truck, that could be one of the staging, areas for the goods that we have from 8 to 12. If we have a lot of hands, it shouldn't take us too long to get Bob's stuff out. But That's what we're doing. We're just getting all the stuff out so she can get it clean, get it set up in order to sell his condo. Much of it will go to the dump. Some of it will go to donations and basically 2 or 3 piles of stuff. So if you can be there 8 to 12 this coming Saturday, it would really, really help Debbie out in being able to sell the place. We're also going to be tearing, if you've been to Bob's, we're tearing up all of the green carpet because, it's just kind of messy. So we're going to be tearing all of that up. So if you've got tools that are appropriate to take up carpet and tack strips and all of that, come prepared with those as well. Anything else? His address? He's in the mainlands. It's in the directory, but I'll send an email out with it. But it's in the mainlands. If you go in that gateway entrance, it's Unit 7. But I'll send the address. I'll send the address out in an email. You should have gotten an email about it already from me if you're on our email list. But I'll resend his address too. Anyone else? Okay, Brother Tim's going to lead us in singing.
Also got some good news. The dinner Sunday, we are only $50 short of, so the church would not have to put any money in. That'd be great. So if you remember and you owed money, will you please see me tonight? That'd be great. Or see Best Sunday. That'd be great. All right, let's all stand and sing number 881. 881. I'm satisfied with just cottage below, a little silver and a little gold. But in that city where the ransom will shine, I want a gold one, that silver line. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop, in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold. Don't think me poor or deserted or lonely. I'm not discouraged. I'm heaven bound. I'm just a pilgrim in search of a city. I want a mansion, a robe and a crown. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop, in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold. You may be seated. Brother Ed.
Well, when you grow up in a town of about 3,000 people, you grow up in a very different way than a lot of people do in this world, who perhaps used to, larger cities or perhaps used to maybe even more rural areas. But when I was growing up, there were very few businesses in my little town. There were a couple of pharmacies. There was a place where men got their hair cut and a place where women got their hair cut. There was a main street, and on that main street, we had a store called Ben Franklin's. And in the Ben Franklin's, you could find just about anything that you wanted. And then surrounding that were some doctors' offices and some churches. And there, for a town of 3,000 people, we had about 10 different churches of different varieties. But it was just a small little town called St. Clairsville, Ohio, set in some of the foothills just off of the Ohio River, about 15 minutes west of Wheeling, West Virginia. Are you interrupting my lesson?
797. Forgot to tell them.
797. Okay, 797. Oh my goodness. So anyhow, as I was saying, you grow up in a small town. One of the things that we did have, we did not have a mall. We had very few restaurants. The one restaurant that we did have was a place called, Melman's. It was a cafeteria, and it was mainly inhabited by folks whose hair was gray or slight shades of, that variety. And it wasn't a place where we as kids liked a whole bunch. But I remember when we got some of our first restaurants, and then eventually a mall came in, and now it's a thriving place that's grown a great deal. But the one thing that we did have was a pizza place. There was a pizza place that was in my hometown by the name of Home Pizza. And there was a pizza place in the town where my grandparents lived called DiCarlo's Pizza. And you couldn't really go anywhere else and find those pizza places. There's no Home Pizza here, as far as I know, in Florida. And it's kind of a unique thing. There's square pieces of pizza and just really different. In order to get this kind of pizza, you had to go to my hometown. Well, until recently. Got a text a few days ago from my cousin, Larry. He was traveling through North Carolina, or excuse me, where's Myrtle Beach? South Carolina, right? Yeah, South Carolina. Traveling through South Carolina in Myrtle Beach, and lo and behold, there on the side of the road in a little strip mall is a DiCarlo's Pizza. Outside of the Ohio Valley, no one's ever heard of DiCarlo's Pizza, but there it was. So he decided, I'm going to go in and take a look. So he goes inside, he takes a look, and sure enough, there on the walls are pictures of my hometown. Myrtle Beach, there it is, St. Clairsville, Wheeling, West Virginia, St. Clairsville Red Devils. Yes, that's our mascot. We were Devils. Okay. So, all of this paraphernalia in there. And he sat down and he ate the pizza and he said it tasted just like home. Tasted just like home. Kind of thought about that story. And I thought, on our spiritual journey through life, I think God gives us glimpses and tastes of what we know is our home with Him. We realize that if we are living the Christian life, we are out of harmony with much of what the world, has to offer. We are living lives that are very different than what people who are pursuing the world over here are trying to live. After all, in places like, 1 John, where we are told that, they're the children of the world and we are the children of God, and they are the children of darkness and we are the children of light. There's this stark contrast that exists. And as we walk in this, through this life, I think God helps us by reminding us of home through certain things. And I'm going to mention just one. And I'm going to go all the way back to the Psalms to kind of walk the idea forward just a little bit, and it won't take but a second or two. It was David who wrote the words. I was glad when they said what? You know what he said? I was glad when they said, let us go into the household of the Lord. And certainly that's about being in the presence of God. But it was also about being in the presence of those of what Jude would call like precious faith. You see, when we gather together, when we come together as the body of Christ, when we come together to encourage and strengthen and lift up and work, and sometimes we have differences. Sometimes we don't agree on how things should get done. But the overriding principle in all of that should be that, we're brothers and sisters. And to me, that is the biggest and largest reminder for us in our daily walk that there's a home that you're waiting to go to. And in that home is a family. In that family, you get to experience not only in this life, but in that life that is to come. Jesus talked about this idea in John chapter 14. When he said, stop letting your hearts be troubled, right? And I know it's worded different in most English versions, but that's literally what he says. You're troubled. Your hearts, you're wondering what's going on. There's trouble there. Stop. Don't let that be the case. You believe in God, believe also in me. And then he tells them, I'm going away and I'm preparing for you this place. And then you're going to come and you're going to be with me there. And the language that he uses is the language of home. It's the language that would be used in say, a wedding ceremony. When a bride and a groom are coming together and they're going to go into their home for the first time, which really isn't their home. It's an extension that would have been built on the larger home that is the family home. That's how they did it in those days. So when we gather together as family, we ought to look at one another and think heaven. We ought to look at one another and think eternity. We ought to look at one another and think, my world is not this home. I'm passing through to someplace better. And that's much better than a pizza shop in Myrtle Beach that reminds you of a pizza shop back home that people just liked. Are you here tonight? And have you given yourself to Christ to be a part of that family that reminds us that we not only have a home, we are moving toward that home, and we've got to walk the path that leads to it. Have you heard his word and believed? Have you repented of your sins, confessed the name of Christ, been baptized for the remission of your sins? Maybe you've done all that. Maybe you've got struggles. Maybe you need prayers. Maybe you have some other need. We encourage you to make it known. While together we stand and sing.
Lord, we come before thee now. At thy feet we humbly bow. Oh, do not our suit disdain. Shall we seek thee, Lord, in vain? Shall we seek thee, Lord, in vain? Grant that all may seek and find thee, our God supremely kind. Heal the sick, the captive free. Let us all rejoice in thee. Let us all rejoice in thee. Please remain standing as Chris leads us in closing prayer.
Would you bow with me, please? Dear Lord, we come before you now, so thankful for this time that we've had to gather together. We ask that you may bless us as we have this middle of the week time, that we can come together, that we can share with you, that we can fellowship with one another. Bless us as we finish out this week. May we be strong encouragers. May we always remember to bring your word with us. Dear Lord, please be with all those we mentioned tonight that are in extra need of prayer. Be with us as we tend to things for those that can't necessarily tend for themselves. Dear Lord, may we always be mindful servants of yours. We're so thankful for your Son. Through his name we pray. Amen. I feel like there's 85 things we're going to talk about. We got time for lunch between now and the end of the week?
Yeah, we need to know.
Yeah.
Very good chance on that.
Oh, yeah. No. But I mean, there's like 85 things to do.
Well, yeah.
Glenn wants to talk about the
I'm
projector
leaving
right now.
for Texas Friday.
He has
No.
to leave and come
And I'll be
back.
gone for about 8 days.
Tell him.
He comes home tonight.
You were getting numbers.
Okay.
And
I don't know how to turn this off.